Hi, folks. I'm Father Joe Grimaldi. You can call me Joe, and I'd like to welcome you to my podcast. But now, here's our host and friend, Ken Calvert.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ken Calvert alongside, well, you know who's alongside. It's Father Joe Grimaldi, and we would like to welcome you to the Father Joe Grimaldi podcast. Things appear to be getting back to a new normal, and at Star Lincoln, we're celebrating by offering a $2,500 cash back on select Lincoln Nautilus models and 0 APR for 72 months. The Nautilus has quickly become Lincoln's most popular SUV. This offer is effective for a very limited time only, and only through July 6, 2021. Aha, my friends, there is more. Don't forget about the many reasons to visit Star Lincoln, 12 Mile Road, just east of Telegraph in Southfield. The quickest way to shop Star Lincoln is by going online, starlincoln.com. Shop Star Express. Browse online, reach out when you're ready, then pick up or have your new Star Lincoln delivered right to your front door. Experience the ultimate in luxury with the stunning lineup of Star Lincoln SUVs, starting with the full-size Comfort and Extreme Lincoln Navigator, the 2021 Lincoln Aviator, or make your getaway in the 360 Copilot Plus packaged Corsair. Visit starlincoln.com. Star Lincoln, home of the star treatment. What do they say about life? There are two things you can count on, right?
Two things you can't possibly avoid.
Okay, and what would those be, sir?
Taxes and death.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people try and avoid the tax man.
They try.
And you know what? It's been going on for centuries, right?
Definitely.
Today we're going to talk about the importance of the tax collector in the Bible, and specifically in the time of Jesus. Do you know where the idea of collecting taxes on people came from? Not necessarily in the times of Jesus, but just in general. Do you know?
I'm just surmising. We all enjoy common benefits whenever we live in a land, we live in a community. We have common benefits. We need roads. We need police protection. We need all of these different things. And so what I'm getting at, in order to take care of that, then everybody does his or her share by contributing taxes so that they can get these things.
Well, it's a topic that we could do, anybody could do, hours and hours upon hours. And the point is simply this. Apparently, the tax collectors were hated in biblical times, were regarded as sinners.
You can imagine, it's one thing when it's your own country and your own people asking for taxes, but it's something else when it's a foreign nation that wants your taxes and you don't get around it. So you could see where if there were Jews in Jerusalem, in Israel, and they were employed by the Romans to collect taxes, well, the taxes didn't stay in Israel, they went to Rome. So to me, it's a no-brainer. You would hate that. You could see why these Jews were looked upon with contempt, because they were taking money from us, from their own, as it were, to give it away to others.
The reason why I brought up the topic today is because I see it often, the tax collector. There's a parable about the tax collector. And Jesus always seemed to not necessarily break bread with the tax collectors, but I believe one of the 12 was at one time a tax collector. Just one of those topics that I found very interesting, that you often see references going back to the tax collector. Jesus visited the temple and the tax collectors were all assembled. You follow what I'm saying?
I do.
And I just wondered, how did Jesus treat tax collectors? So exactly how did he treat them? Gentiles and tax collectors. He eats with sinners and tax collectors. He heals the centurion's servant. He calls a tax collector to be one of his disciples. So tax collector...
You've done your homework. That's great.
I have done my homework. So tax collectors often force people to pay far more than they actually owed. and they kept the excess. In addition, they were seen as traitors by the average Jew because they were working for the hated Roman government that were occupying their country. The quandary for the Jews were, why are you just kind of letting these guys off the hook?
All right, there could be a little bit of an explanation for that. Jesus did not come for the righteous. He did come to save the self-righteous, okay? So Jesus certainly wanted to befriend these people, maybe to convert them. He had dinner with them. He was a doctor, if you want, and I use that term in quotes. He wanted to heal them. He wanted to bring them into the fold, which he did with the tax collector that became a disciple. But I think it's important that you realize, too, not you, Ken, but generally that we all realize, is that in order for him to make a headway with the people in converting them, he would have to interact with them and maybe sit down and have coffee and cake with them or whatever the case might be. So he did interact with the tax collector. He interacted with the sinner. He came to save the sinner, not just to condemn the sinner. Well, that's a given, huh? Right from the beginning we know that. So, yes, he did do all those things, but it was with a purpose. It was not just so that he could go out and have a good time.
I don't recall the parable, but at the end of the day, I think forgiveness of the tax collector is, well, why are you being so nice to this person?
Well, it's not forgiveness, because we don't know that yet, but trying to get them to change their ways. And also with the people that were not Christian, or were not Jewish, I should say, he really tried to bring them into the fold. And I think one of the confusing things about when we read the Bible is that we speak about the Jews like they were Catholics or something, but
I'm glad you brought that up.
yeah, because they were Jews, and Jesus was a Jew. And though what happened was when he preached in the temple, he was a Jew. But they noticed something different about him. And when they found out that he was doing all of these wonderful things, even miracles, and he was known as Jesus the Christ, wow, now they're going to become followers of Jesus. And as a follower of Jesus, well, you become a Christian because you're following Christ, or the Christ, the Anointed One. And so that's, I think, how that evolves. Yeah, it's interesting because the non-Jews were also sometimes not sinners, but they were considered outcasts. So now we bring them into the picture as well. And so he wants to interact with them so that they can try to understand what he's doing.
But being a tax collector in those days was probably a great job.
Well, it was a great job only because of money. It was lucrative for them.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, but
But
not looked upon nicely in society.
but doing the dirty work of
the Romans.
Of the Romans.
Yeah.
Again, Jesus was a Jew. Let's spend some time with the evolution of Jesus being a Jew to ultimately Christianity.
Well, you have Judaism, because of Jesus, evolves into Christianity. So much so that if you were to go back to your translations in Arabic and so on and so forth of what we say at Mass, it's exactly the Jewish prayer. So the prayer of blessing, that's not unique to Christians. That's something that the Jews would pray all the time. And so it was interesting how that remained, that it became part of the Mass. A lot of the words that we say at Mass are really going back to Judaism. Now, what happens is this: they became so prominent that they eventually were kicked out of the temple, okay, because they did all of their worshiping in the temple. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not talking about Hail Mary, full of grace. No, their worship was Jewish worship, but they stood out differently because Jesus stood out differently. He did things differently. And so because of that, they may have been considered as rebels. I mean, Jesus suffered the death of a real criminal. At that time, that's what he was considered, a criminal, because he fought against the system. And it was interesting to see that. But he had a big following, and because they used to worship in the temple, well, little by little, people got upset and got rid of them real fast. Well, not real fast, because the separation between Christianity and Judaism did not happen overnight. It was matter of fact, it lingered because people couldn't forget what they did as Jews. So even though things changed little by little, there was always reference to Judaism because they were Jews themselves who had converted into Christianity. They didn't know it was Christianity. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, but it's not the worst evil in the Bible either. Here's what I'm trying to say.
Go ahead. No.
Yeah. All I want to say is this. Forgiveness is always part of Jesus' life, and this is why he ingratiated with people, okay? He ingratiated others by trying to bring them into the faith, as it were, trying to have them convert their hearts to doing good rather than to doing evil. So whether it was a tax collector, whether it was a lady of the night, or whether it was whatever, he tried to bring them together at dinner. He interacted with them. You know, you had those do-gooders, self-righteous people, I should say. You know, he can't be that great if he's hanging around with all this low life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he's enjoying that low life. Well, what he was doing, basically, is trying to change their hearts and trying to point them in the right direction. And it didn't matter if they were tax collectors or if they were ladies of the night, huh? It all was the same thing. If they could change their ways and look to Jesus and to follow him and follow what he said, follow his path, then they would be on the right track.
Yeah.
So basically, I'm going to say this. When we read the Bible, what do we have to always keep in the back of your head? It's never a book of facts. It's always a book of faith.
Oh.
So you have to keep that in your mind always. When you read the Bible, it's never a book of facts, but it's always a book of faith. So if you want to find things that are incorrect, whether they be scientific or whether they be customs or whatever they might be, you're going to find lots of mistakes there in the Bible, because the authors of the scripture basically wrote to engender faith, to bring about the faith in people. And they did that by, well, you know, a good writer uses literary methods and techniques to bring across his or her ideas.
Surely, yeah.
And so that's what they did in the old days. I mean, the days of the writers, the scriptures, we don't know who wrote all the scriptures. We just don't know them. They're attributed to certain people. Like you have Luke and the book of Acts, written by Luke, both. Well, who is that? You know, you have to start to really do a lot of research. We're talking over 2,000 years.
Right.
And so it's not easy to trace. In some cases, a lot of people put their names down as Paul in order to maintain some credibility. So this way, if Paul is written in there, that means that's something. It's got to be good.
Yeah, right. Anybody that was considered a scribe, back then they were the James Pattersons of their time. They had that ability to draw you in, the Elmore Leonards, if you will.
Well, both the scribes and the Pharisees got bad names along the way, and they weren't all that bad, okay? Yeah. I'm just thinking the Pharisees were super, super liturgical, and so they knew all the little intricate rules and regulations.
Right.
And now, in that in itself is not bad, but if you become someone who exaggerates those points, well, that's not great. So the Pharisees get a bad name. The scribes get a bad name because they maybe they didn't write completely everything that they saw, or they changed things. or because they were in cahoots also. And
Right.
then, you had all of these different factions among the Romans and among the Jews. And so it was kind of interesting to see all of that. But book of faith, not of facts.
Every single Mass, every single prayer, the bottom line should be our faith. And basically, keep the faith.
Definitely. No. You said it beautifully.
Okay. Well, with that said, how about you say a beautiful prayer, sir?
I'm just going to give you an introduction first because it's just going to be one line from Paul to the Corinthians. The coronavirus is invisible to the naked eye, and yet we fear its great power and ability to wreck our lives. Jesus, though, is also not visible to us today. So why are we treating this virus as if it's bigger than God? Fear seems to be the culprit here. We doubt God's ability to help us to get through this pandemic and believe what we see on the news instead. We think it will never end. Try to keep our faith strong during this time and remind yourself that Jesus is also working behind the scenes to help get us through this difficult time, and he has not left us. And Paul in 2 Corinthians says, "For we live by faith and not by sight." Amen. This is Father Joe Grimaldi, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the Father Joe Podcast.
If you'd like, you can email us. It's frjoepodcast@gmail.com. That's frjoepodcast@gmail.com. We're also on Facebook. Simply search Father Joe Grimaldi. And thanks for listening, everyone.